See my camera. Here we go. Two people coming in. Got Callie and Connor. Right. Right. Good morning. Good morning, Connor. Good morning, Callie. We are in person and on Zoom, and there is rumor that there is a workaround to get us back on Facebook Live too. I just have to work with Yvette to figure that out. So if we can get over that hurdle, that would be lovely. This morning we are, oh my goodness, this morning we are session 16 out of 20 working with buyers and sellers. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to jump in because right now there's no tech issues. So we're going to just go crazy and go forward. So I'm going to share screen. I see Becca coming on. I will let her in just a second. Let me get this. Share screen. And I need to let Becca in. There we go. Need to turn up volume. Those of you on Zoom, can you hear me okay?
Hey, good morning, Kristen. I can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I had both my computer and the TV up. Thank you, Connor. Wanted to make sure, get rid of the echo. Okay. So we've got people online. We've got sharing of a screen. Oh. All right. Well, good morning. It is a gorgeous morning. Okay, the sun's been out 2 days in a row, even though we're supposed to have some rain later on today. But you know what? We're going to take it. We are going to take it and run with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into today's content of working with buyers and sellers. So if you remember what we did last week and the week before, we did win with buyers and win with sellers. We talked about who is a motivated buyer, who's a motivated seller. We talked about buyers consultations. We talked about listing presentations. Remember, Ignite is just scratching the surface and introducing you to all of this. In order for you to get proficient and become skilled, then what you're learning, you're going to have to go practice. And if you're not practicing it, you're not doing the next step in your learning and mastering this material. So I'm going to highly encourage that you have someone either to practice with or you practice on your own on how to do a buyer's consultation. Don't wait for the first time for you to do one. Is with your first client. Okay. We kind of call that malpractice. You're going to be nervous enough as it is. You should have some practice underneath your belt, unless you got licensed yesterday and have a buyer today, right? So let's do what we do before we get into the content, and it is time to scan the launch check-in. And there's the bit.ly link. If you can't scan the QR code, please let us know that you are here. I have to just do a shout out to Lacelia. She's not on right now, but she's been going back and watching these videos. And the reason I know is because she scans when she starts to watch them. And in the last week, she's rewatched like 3 or 4 of these classes. So kudos to those of you who are continuing to chew on the information. None of us, or maybe there's some of you that can get it the first time out. I'm not that fast of a learner. I'm a slow learner at times. So I'm a fast doer, but I do have to really take time to digest new information and all of that. So if you just take a minute, do the scan, do your class check-in, we really appreciate it, and I'm always looking at those. I get notified every time you do that. So I'm excited to get into this material today, Megan.
Yeah, me too.
Megan and I are teaching this week. I'm doing Tuesday, Megan's doing Thursday. So we are ready to take you into what does it mean to work with. Once you get the buyer or seller to say, yes, we will hire you, then what the heck do you do? And what information do you need to share? So if everybody's got the scan, let's keep going. So this week, here's what we're going to cover. Identifying the key information you'll be able to, information to build success with your buyers and sellers, meaning sharing the right information so that they understand and you're setting good expectation. Employ strategies to assist buyers and sellers with their decision making. I hear this on occasion from new agents and experienced agents. My buyer or seller, they need to do this. This is what they need to do. Well, we can't and shouldn't make our buyers and sellers do anything unless it has to do with legal issues or ethical issues, that type of thing. Otherwise, these are decisions for them. Really what we are the ones giving them good information so they can make thoughtful decisions. Now, here's the thing, it's going to be a thoughtful decision for them, and you will not always agree with the decisions your buyers and sellers make. You won't. You'll think, God, I'd never do that. I'd never buy this house. Ugly as sin. Zip your lip.
Yep.
Our job is to tell them the benefits of this house and resale wise, what could be some of the things that could hinder an easy sale of this home. You know, people think, oh, I got a bargain for this home. Well, yeah, because it's on a busy street and it has to be sold at a discount because it's on a busy street. Oh, I really got this house for a song. Well, yeah, it's in a floodplain and you're going to have to sell it at a discount too because it's in a floodplain. So it's our job to let them know that some of those things will not go away when they go to resell their house, but it's always up to them in the end. So do not be trying to make decisions. Now, the information we give them can be very persuasive.
Mhm.
So we can be persuasive, but we are not to make decisions for them. And sometimes it's going to pain you. It did me. I'd be like, oh God, I do almost anything, stand on my head to get them to maybe make a different decision. But at the end of the day, it is their decision. Build a strong success foundation relationship with your client and the co-op agent, meaning you have to have a really good relationship to get through the home buying, home selling process. And here's why. People get emotional. People kind of sometimes lose their common sense. It's a hard process.
Mhm.
And some people get through it swimmingly, and some people lose their cookies. They lose their, oh my goodness. So we've got to be that sane one. We've got to be that one that brings the calm. We are not ever to bring drama to the transaction. If you bring drama and say, oh my God, that other agent is just such a jerk and they're awful and they're difficult and blah, 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 and you, or that seller, oh my God, they just are an egomaniac. You bring that to your clients and they will start adopting that same mindset. And then once you do that, once that starts happening and it becomes us against them, or they're good guy, we're good guys, they're bad guys, then you're going to have a really hard time getting this transaction to the closing table. It's our job to keep everybody's emotions as low as possible, and then not bring our own in. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you can have a very demanding client. The co-op agent can have a very demanding client, or you can have a co-op agent who's high strung. You can have a co-op agent who doesn't co-op well, doesn't play well with others. So you have to be prepared to be maybe the only sane one at the table during this transaction to get it to the closing table. Now, if you don't care if it gets to the closing table, then yeah, go ahead, bring drama and get everybody all stirred up and get everybody just riled and see what happens. Because I'll guarantee you, it's hard to get people calmed down and moving forward when that starts to happen in a transaction. Okay, so this quote, somebody's having fun, love it. Virtually every top producing agent we've ever worked with has a deep and almost inherent sense of service. They have a servant's heart and place their buyers and sellers' real estate experience above all else. They're always thinking service. This is Gary Keller from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. Yeah, you're craning your neck. Up close and personal. It's kind of like sitting on the first row of the movie theater when you're
Okay, I'm not in the right spot here.
So, you know, a lot of times when I'm talking to people thinking about getting into real estate, and I say, hey, what real estate? What's got you interested about it? And they'll say to me, oh, I love houses. I just love houses. I love houses. I watch HGTV all the time, and I just love houses. Well,
Not the right reason to get into this business.
I mean, it's fine to
Yeah.
love them, but what we do is almost all people.
Yes.
And houses are a little bit of what we do. And what they don't know, and what you will experience if you haven't already, most houses are average or below average that you go in. There are very few showstoppers that you're just going to go like, oh my gosh. We're showing average people's homes that are not show places. That may smell, they may be in disrepair, they may have decor that we don't know where they got that, or have decor tastes that are interesting. You know, you're going to see a little bit of everything in people's houses. And so you have to remember that it is really that we are serving people. And I agree with this quote so much, that having a servant's heart and helping people through a complex legal process so that you can help them get to their dreams can be very fulfilling.
Yeah.
But if you're in this just for the money, you're going to have a different kind of business. You're going to have to go after strangers all the time because you will become transactional and not client-based, service-based. Does that make sense? I want you to understand there are agents out there, they do high volume and they're transaction-based. I will tell you they have to go after strangers all the time because they don't have much repeat business because of the lack, I should say, of client experience they provide. So really, we want a business that people come back to us and they refer people they know to us because of how we treated them and took care of them and the service that we provided. So this is also where you can differentiate yourself very easily in this business by going above and beyond. And above and beyond in our business doesn't have to be like leaps and bounds. It can be the little things that you do. Little things like I always had a little cooler in my car when I took buyers around. We had drinks, I had snacks. When we did inspections for my buyers, I always brought food for the inspector and my buyers and me, and beverages because we're going to be there a couple of hours. I tried to make the experience as nice as possible, and as pleasant as possible, because a lot of it was stressful. So I really think this is important, having that servant's heart and having, what you want to accomplish and what level of service you want to provide. And you get to decide your level of service. We all have a fiduciary duty that I hope you remember from license law class, of what your fiduciary duties are that you must do. Not all agents do, but we're required to do by our license. And then what do you do beyond that?
Yep.
So how you want to plus it is totally up to you, which I love. That's soon as I got that, soon as I realized, oh my gosh, I can be above the crowd by just doing this, this, and this. Yeah. All of my listings have a listing book. And that is a notebook that I have all the information in it about the house. Yeah, you can make booklets, you can print booklets here, and there's nothing wrong with those, except people take those and they run out.
Mhm.
So if you haven't learned something about me, I'm the queen of efficiency. And if I can have something give me more efficiency, a house book was one of them. I would have that house book in the house the day that it went live in on the market. It had the seller's disclosure in it. It had all the upgrades in it. It had neighborhood information that I'd get from RPR in it. It had just everything I could put in there about the house for the buyer and the buyer's agent to make it as easy as possible. And because it was in a physical notebook, I never had one taken from my listing. Okay, so it stayed there, and I didn't get a late Friday afternoon call from my client saying, we don't have any flyers, we don't have any booklets, come over, when I was getting ready to go to dinner. So it also kept me from those having to rush over across town, because some of your listings may not be close to your home, and it's kind of a trek to go out there and just take some flyers. So I always made sure there was something there, and then it was my closing gift for the buyer of my listing.
Mhm.
It was packed full of information about that house that they just bought, and it was branded with me. So that when it came time, they're probably going to keep that book the whole time they have that house and slip receipts in it. That's kind of how it's designed, is so that becomes their home resource book. Mine's very thick for my very own house, because I created one for my very own house. And so when they go to sell that house and they find that they never heard from their buyer's agent since they closed, or their agent's no longer in the business, they could pull out that book and there I am. Okay, so great agent-client communication. One of the things, if you're not a great communicator, and some of us aren't, I mean, we can all improve. There's always room for opportunity, but if you're not, you're going to have to get good and clear with your clients. You cannot leave them in the dark, or they start questioning you. They start questioning, people's imagination is a bad place, can be a frightening place, and they start thinking about things. So you need to provide a strong foundation for this relationship, and effective communications can do that. It sets and manages the expectations proactively throughout the transaction. Also gives your clients peace of mind. And it enhances your credibility. So things like that pre-listing email that I send, setting expectations and asking for information. Also, once they go under contract, I have that power tool say, congratulations, we've just gone under contract. I've got a buyer version and a seller version that says, here's what's going to happen next. Now, you should have had that conversation in the very beginning with them, but they're not going to remember. So you've got to always be reinforcing. I think having a SMART plan in place that starts when they go under contract, just to remind them things about utilities and moving and about insurance. And did everybody see what I posted on the Facebook, New Agent Facebook page about insurance, home insurance? if you haven't had a buyer looking for home insurance lately, you need to be ready and prepare them that it is very hard and very expensive. We have an insurance crisis going on in the United States. We're not hit as hard in Kansas City as in Florida and California, where they've had so many natural disasters and wildfires and all of that. But it is showing its ugly head here in Kansas City. So be prepared that that could be something that causes buyers stress. And I would even maybe have them talk to an insurance agent in the very beginning before we go home shopping and just talk about, they won't have a specific address, but they could give a zip code or a city, that type of thing. That would help of an insurance agent to start talking to them about what's going on with home insurance right now. Again, I see it this way. Setting expectation means taking out as many surprises as absolutely possible for our clients. And so that's our job. I want to eliminate as many surprises for you. That's why we have so much information in the beginning, and then I'm going to drip information on you if you're my client all the way to make sure that you know what's going on. You know, there are times after you go into contract that there's really nothing happening, or you're just waiting for that next step. And however, I'm going to tell you, you need to talk to your clients at least once a week when you're under contract, even if there's nothing going on, even if you're waiting for the lender or what have you, you really need to be touching them. And I know sometimes you don't. When you go on the market with a listing and you don't get an offer right away. And while we're hearing about crazy offers and houses going quickly, I also am seeing more buyer agent bonuses and other things in the ads that I get in my daily email that tell me that there are houses that are sitting on the market. And sometimes, and when our market starts to shift and not be such a heavy seller's market, or you get a house, maybe they didn't want to price it right and it's staying on the market, you're going to have to talk to them at least once a week, because when you go silent, they think you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
And it can be a dangerous, then they assume the worst of you, even if you're working your tail off to try to get their listing exposed.
Yeah. I usually talk to my clients at least 2 to 3 times a week personally.
Yeah.
I sometimes daily, depending on what we're doing, but yeah, once a week is because you don't know what they're doing on the other end of that week. If they actually been calling the insurance agents, did they get the utilities transferred over in their name yet? You know, you've left homework, but you've got to follow up, make sure they've done it, because they procrastinate terribly, or they get busy, or whatever, and they forget.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you don't have everything ready and it's 3 days to close.
And that's where anytime you can support and reiterate what the lender has been requiring of them,
Yes.
that's why checking with the lender is also important, and say, hey, have the buyer's gotten you everything you need?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can help with? Because some buyers will move painfully slow, and that can mean that they won't close on time. Sometimes it's the lender's fault. Sometimes it's the agent's fault. Sometimes it's the title company's fault. Sometimes it's the client's fault because they're not doing, it's time is of the essence when you're in this process.
But you got to be in touch with all those different entities throughout each week, or you don't know that there's an issue with the lender or the title company. So, it's your job as an agent to stay on top of those things. Don't expect them to communicate with you always.
100%. I was so naive in the beginning. I just thought, well, they know what they're doing.
They'll call me if there's a problem.
And then there were problems and I didn't know it. And they were surprises for me and my client. And I learned, because I felt like, well, I don't know as much as they do. I don't know as much as a lender knows. I don't know as much as a title company knows. No, here's what you have to ask. You just have to check in and say, hey, just checking in on the closing for the Smiths at 123 Main Street. Do you have everything you need? And are we on schedule to close on May 25th?
Yeah.
So that's all you need to know, basically, to be able to check in and make sure everything's on track. And then when you check with your client, say, hey, did you get a call from the lender? Did they ask you for any additional information? Did you get it to them? Time is of the essence. I know it's a pain in the tushy and they want so much paperwork. It feels so painful, but this is what we've got to do to get you closed on time, because we have a contract that says we have to close by that date. Not optional if you just didn't quite get your stuff done, right? So it's really important that you are working. It's important to recognize that you can rarely over communicate with clients. It's a complicated process that they will only navigate a few times in their lives. You will continually set expectations and keep everyone on track with your communications. And sometimes you're going to be a broken record. You're going to feel like a parent to these people.
Well, it's just a lot of times depending on my clients especially, you do kind of take on that parent role in that sense where it's like, okay, these are all the things we got to get done today, and you're making lists, you're managing the project. I mean, you're very much the one who has to run the.
And you just have to
run
be
the-
okay repeating yourself
Yes.
over and over and
reminding
over
people,
again.
like,
And because they don't, well, let's be real. We as coaches repeat some things a lot, and some of you are gonna be like, I've heard him say this 10 times. Well, that's because we know in the beginning when we're throwing all of this at you, that it's overwhelming and not all of it's gonna stick. Probably even 50% is not gonna stick. And so, yes, we're gonna repeat things. And that's why we say, take the Ignite classes more than once, because you're not gonna remember most of this. And a lot of it you won't remember till you start doing.
Right.
However, I promise you, for most of you, for almost all of us, if you have done all of your training and education, which is on you, that is your responsibility as a new agent, that when you start doing these things for the first time, you will have some like, oh yeah, little flashbacks.
Mhm.
You'll be like, oh yeah, I remember they mentioned something about this. And even if you don't remember exactly what it was, if it stopped you from taking the next step until you had clarity, it's a win in our book as coaches. It's like, okay, they thought about it. Okay. All right. There are 3 levels of service: purpose, value proposition, and fiduciary. So let's talk about that. Let's remind ourselves, and they're from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. Do you see our training is all based from that book? Almost every training class you take in KW is tied to the MREA. If you don't have it yet, I know that we had a couple of people do orientation
Yeah.
recently. They just need to come by my office and get the book so that you can have that. But it is a critical book that you read. And I know some of you are going to tell me, well, I'm not a reader. Well, there are some things we have to read in life. There are, and you can do it. As painful as it may be, you can do it. I know you can. So let's talk about these 3 levels. Purpose. Masters of service have a clear understanding of why they should be hired and can articulate it to anyone at any time. Great service begins with a clear purpose for why someone should work with you. So when you're new, you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing yet. Well, that's where you do. I know it feels like it's before you're ready to say this, but you've got to be able to say, my purpose is to guide you through the complicated legal transaction of buying and selling a home with hopefully as least amount of stress in the shortest amount of time. Does that sound good to you? With my background in whatever, I bring that expertise, and that's where we get in the value proposition. The best agents can translate their purpose and why people should hire them into a specific set of services they will provide. So I was able to tell people that here's what I do for my clients that is above and beyond. I want to make this experience I know it's a stressful experience, but I do want to make it fun. So we're gonna have some fun along the way, even when things are feeling a little hairy. I promise we're gonna have fun, and I'm gonna take you through this process so that you feel confident that you know what's coming up next. See, because I'm gonna make sure that you understand the process, and I'm gonna always give you a heads up on what comes next. Then fiduciary, highly productive agents provide a level of service based on their commitment to act as a fiduciary for their clients. They place their clients' interest above all others, even their own. A fiduciary brings a level of care and trust to the relationship that a functional agent does not. So here's what's hard sometimes. Remember I said it's always their decision? They sometimes are going to decide not to move forward. You may even list the house and things aren't going well and they're feeling frustrated and they say, we're just not going to sell now. Buyer might say, hey, we've put in 4 offers and we haven't won a one and we just feel beat up and bruised. We're going to sit out. And it's going to be hard. And all of your work, you're not going to be compensated for that you did up to that point with them. And there are going to be times where you want to make certain, that's why I say we never make decisions for our clients, because if you push them into something or push them to do something or accept something that they may not be comfortable with, and you did it just to get that transaction and to get that sale, it can come back to bite you. And they will. I believe most people are going to pick up that you're really not out for their best interests. Now, here's what's hard. I don't know if you've ever had this happen, Megan. And it taught me every time things wouldn't go well, it was a learning moment for me. And I had a client say to me, well, I feel like you're not even on my side. You're talking about what the seller wants. I don't care. This is what I want. And here's what I learned. I learned that I didn't set the expectations with them clearly enough that this isn't a win or lose situation.
Yeah.
That both parties have to be okay with the terms. I don't say love the terms because sometimes they may not. While I wholeheartedly embrace win-win, the wins may feel a little different on both sides. Makes sense? So, but I didn't explain in the beginning enough about how negotiating goes and what that looks like, and that if we get adversarial, they can just say no and walk away. And so that's where I had to say, there are times I'm going to tell you what's been shared with me about the seller's perspective. And sometimes we kind of have to put ourselves in their shoes when we're thinking about how to negotiate with this other party. And that's not me siding with them. That's me wanting to give you a clear picture of what the negotiating field looks like. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Are you guys there? Hello?
I'm here. I did raise my hand earlier. I was gonna comment on the last thing we were talking about. It's like going above and beyond. I was on the pivot shift call this morning, and somebody in a group of agents got together and created a monopoly board on how to like track where they're at in the process, which I personally liked a lot. So I just thought that was a really good idea. I wanted to share.
That's a really popular one out there, the Monopoly board. It kind of makes it a game that people can relate to. So thanks for bringing that up, Serenity, and kudos. I love that you were listening to Pivot Shift Ed this morning. It should be a must do for everyone every morning. It's the best way to start your day in real estate that is out there. It is great knowledge, great people, great energy to get you really positively going into your day about real estate. And it's got actionable information for you to take and use, which I love. Okay, well, let's keep going on this. Well, let's talk about what's the difference between functionary and fiduciary. And functionary is the average and below average agents, low level. It's the specific task relationship with clients. They do the job by dotting the i's and crossing the t's, but nothing extra. I'm going to tell you that some of them don't even dot the i's or cross the t's. Okay, let's just be honest. Low level, low relationship, meaning they are transactional. In my mind, this is definitely somebody who's transactional. Assumes very little responsibility. Now, because we do have responsibilities. However, I want you not to take on the whole transaction on your shoulders, meaning you are not 100% responsible for them buying a house. You are not 100% responsible for them selling a house. It's a partnership. That's another thing that I found I had to communicate very early on to set those expectations. So that people understood. I can't perform magic. I'm pretty good,
Right.
but I'm not pulling a rabbit out of my hat if I don't have a good partner. That's usually the rabbit, the good partner with the clients. They have low skill. You can somehow be in this business and not be very skillful, especially in a good, easy market, because it doesn't take a lot of skill. In harder markets, it takes skill. It takes skill to get people through transactions right now. Records information, responds to needs, processes data, narrow picture point of view, delivers information, other directed, minimal legal responsibility. They act more like an employee than a partner, does the task, tells and sells. They try to sell without educating, stays out of the decision making, or they try to make I think it can be either they totally hands off, because I've seen this too, where I've had agents say, well, I just said this about the house. And then I told them it is their decision, but there wasn't enough information given for them to make a good decision or thoughtful decision. So we've got to give them enough, follows rules and procedures, maybe. I think this is being very generous, is replaceable and minimally paid. A fiduciary is a high trust relationship with clients and always puts their clients' interests at the forefront, even before the agent's own. And sometimes it's going to be hard because you're going to realize that it's going to impact your ability to put food on the table sometimes. Sometimes some of the emotion that you feel from a co-op agent when things are getting really sticky and it looks like maybe the transaction's in danger and it may not work through, and that co-op agent starts escalating emotionally with you, sometimes it could mean that they haven't had a commission check in several months, and this is the difference between food on their table and not. And sometimes it's fear talking. So come from grace, come from curiosity. And understand that sometimes people's fears, sometimes when a co-op agent is difficult, sometimes it's because they have a difficult client and it's them just channeling that same energy at you. And just always give grace to people. A fiduciary, you're working at a high level. You're going to make sure you have a very tight relationship. You're going to take on the responsibility of making sure this gets done. To what your clients want to achieve. You work to master and have great skills and knowledge. You perceive the information, meaning you take that information and you share it in a way that's going to be helpful to the client. You anticipate needs. That's why I say we should eliminate surprises. We should say, okay, here's what can happen next. Don't just take them into the inspection period and not tell them what could happen if you go into renegotiations. Don't not tell them what the timelines are and all of this. It shouldn't be that the first time you're sharing some of these most stressful points of the transaction is in the transaction. Again, I know they won't remember all of it, but they will have gone, oh yeah, Megan said that this is what could happen in this situation, right? We've got a big picture, advises and consults. You're self-directed, meaning you're gonna get things done. You don't have to have other people telling you what to do. You're a partner in this transaction. You own the results. You educate and guide. You get it. You've got a trust-based relationship with your client instead of just pushing them through a transaction. Huge difference. Dual agency. Okay, I know you learned about dual agency in license law, but we do not practice it. Yes, it's legal in Missouri. I know that. However, our brokerage and hardly any other brokerage in Kansas City allows that due to the legal risks. That means that I can't wrap my head around that I could equally represent two parties. And I will tell you, being a former broker, and I even saw it in my own, being an agent in my own practice, that even in transaction broker, which we'll talk about here in just a second, so you have clarity on transaction broker, even then people would think that you took one side more than another. No matter how judicious and how fair you feel that you can be, it is really impossible because people will have the perception that you took one side or did more for one side than another.
Yeah, and even just maintaining your own impartiality is difficult because, we come with our own set of judgments and you're like, this scenario really does seem better to me.
Yeah.
If I were in those people's shoes, it's very hard to be impartial. Very difficult. I would never want to be in that position.
Well, and here's the thing is then when you go to transaction broker, so you all remember in license law, you learned about transaction broker, and I bet your head was spinning about all the different forms of agency.
Yeah.
Transaction broker only happens if you have a signed listing agreement with a seller and a signed buyer's agency with a buyer before that buyer ever sees your listing. It is not, you do not become a transaction broker if the buyer comes to your open house on that listing, or they call on a sign call about that listing, or whatever, that they were not yours. They are unrepresented and they would stay unrepresented unless they decide to get their own representation. Does that make sense? And when you become a transaction broker, then you become Switzerland. You literally are guiding them through the process and the timelines and the paperwork. You're doing all the paperwork. However, you cannot counsel and you cannot advise. Now, I'm going to tell you, personally as an agent, I never did this.
I didn't.
Now, it's not right or wrong, because we have agents here that handle transaction broker, and they do it beautifully. Okay, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm going to tell you it's going to be a choice for you, and I chose never to do it because here's the thing. One, I thought, well, how will I keep my mouth shut if one of my clients is doing something that I don't think is good? It's a bad decision. And I can't say anything to him. I have to just bite my lip. Oh my God, that would kill me. And so I just didn't know how I would be able to do that. And I actually loved to be, I also use it a little bit as a marketing ploy about my elevated service to my sellers. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you hire me, I will always represent you 100% throughout the whole transaction, even if one of my buyers, if we decide this may be a good house for them to see, I'm going to tell them in advance before I show your house that if they walk into this house and they think it's their house, then they cannot say any more to me than I need another agent, because I will not represent them. I will get them, I will refer them to another agent, or they can choose an agent, but you will get me the entire time that I represent you the whole time that we have your house listed and until it closes. So I used it as a marketing so that you're gonna always have my expertise and my advice, my guidance, my negotiating skills. Those you will always have those throughout the whole transaction because they're paying my commission.
Yeah.
I felt like that's what I owed them.
Yeah.
So again, this is something that you can choose to do, but in the beginning, when you're brand new, can I tell you, it's even harder. It's even harder. Hi, Dominic. So I don't necessarily, know what you're doing if you have a signed buyer and a signed listing about transaction broker. And remember, unrepresented buyers you do not then just turn them into a buyer and get them to sign a buyer's agency. Now, if they see that house, that unrepresented buyer, and it's not the house for them, you can all day long sign them up and convert them into your buyer all day long. But if they come to you unrepresented on your listing, then they stay unrepresented unless they get other representation. Make sense?
Hey, Kristen,
Yes.
so a transaction broker, that would be illegal for that to happen in Kansas, correct?
A transaction
you-
broker is legal in both states. It is
Okay.
not the dual agency. Connor, dual agency is when you try to represent and counsel two sides at the same time on the same transaction. That's crazy talk. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we don't, even though it's legal, we do not. More agents have been sued doing dual agency than almost any other thing in our world. So we just don't go there. It's too risky. Way too risky. Set expectations. We've been talking about this, about setting expectations. We've talked about the 3 levels of service. You're going to, you could see those as the what of being a great agent. Now let's talk a bit about the how of being a great agent. The how you reach the 3 levels of service for your clients is largely about communication and education. As a real estate agent, you're immersed in buying and selling houses every single day. It's your job. And for a lot of us, it's our passion as well. For our clients, it's something they may have never done before or haven't done in a very long time. They're unlikely to do this buying and selling of a house more than every 8 years, according to NAR statistics. So even if they say, oh yeah, we've bought and sold a lot of houses, well, when is the last time? Most likely 8 to 10 years ago. And things have changed. They change every year, let alone in 10 years, a lot can change. So while some things may feel familiar to them, they may even be surprised about some of the things we do currently that they did not. Well, just the length of the contract. We're up to 16 pages. It was a lot shorter. It used to be like 1 page front and back before my time. And then I think when I was an agent, I think it was like 7 pages when I was new. But then we had the financing addendum, and then we had a lot of addendums, and it wasn't all in the contract. So think about it. The stakes are huge for your client, and it is usually your client's biggest single asset that they're going to buy or sell. So therefore, you're going to demonstrate your expertise by educating your client on the realities of the market that we're in, as well as their personal real estate process, and you're going to do it often. To do this, you need to set expectations for the process and communications. And remember what I said, you're probably going to have to do it again and again and be okay with that. Okay. So, you've touched your buyer and seller in the consultation. However, this is a complicated and emotional process that people don't remember everything the first time you tell them, especially when it isn't in proximity. It isn't happening right away. So set those time expectations because that's going to be really important here. For example, did you tell them that they need to go out and see properties the same day they hit on the market? Whereas if it's not a seller's market, then maybe we have until tomorrow to go see that property, right? But right now, do you ask your buyers, hey, with the job that you have, do you have any flexibility that we could go see houses during the day? Because if not, we might be at a true deficit, right? So you've got to know that about your buyers right off the bat. Sellers the same. Hey, if we have showings, how are you going to handle those dogs? Do you need to go home and go kennel them every time there's a showing? That probably won't work.
Yeah.
Right? In the last year or two, we've actually told, because the market being pretty hot, we've told sellers, hey, let's list your house on either a Thursday, Friday, and then you be gone for 3 days. Just vacate your house because we're probably going to get it under contract, but we're going to have a slew of showings. And you're not going to be at home during the showings anyway. So I don't want you kicked out again and again and again, right? Setting those expectations of and they have to understand that time is of the essence. When they think they have a lot of time, and that's part of the qualifying of a buyer. What is their comfort level of making decisions quickly? Especially big money decisions. Some people are going to freeze up on you and you're going to be like, we gotta go write an offer now. You say you want this house. Well, I think I need to sleep on it.
Oh my gosh, right now, no, you can't. My clients had that experience on Friday. The house, they had, I don't know, 16, 18 showings Friday evening, and then there's so much interest, offers were due Saturday at noon. Literally been on the market for 12 hours. It was it. It was nuts.
See, I wouldn't have done, let me tell you something, that's nuts. And as a listing agent, I would have never done
I
that.
wouldn't either. You've got to at least give it the full weekend. Let people come see it.
Well, and I would make, all offers have to have a 48-hour expiration to them, and here's why. Remember what David said last week about cancellations? 19% of buyers are canceling transactions once they go under contract. I think part of that is due to they're making big dollar decisions in an hour, and they just saw the house for 15 minutes.
Exactly.
I believe that if you give people 48 hours to submit offers, it gives them a little time to chew on it.
Absolutely.
It also allows you as a listing agent to do your due diligence.
Right.
Do you know that you should be calling that buyer's lender to see how solid the buyer is, and also kind of get to know this lender to make sure they're okay?
Yeah. You don't have time to do any of that if you're making offers due within 12 hours of the first listing.
I don't think, and here's the other thing, as an agent, and this is what we do for a living, when you turn off your ability to hold an open house or to get more sign calls or that type of thing off of a listing, you've cut your ability to make money, because every listing should get you at least one other piece of business, a lead or two. And in 12 hours, I bet they got none.
Well, no, if your offers are due Saturday at noon, you don't even have a time, you don't even give yourself an open house afternoon.
Yeah.
I mean, I was shocked.
So again, preparing our sellers. It seems really exciting to get multiple offers, some of your sellers won't know what to look for. And if you're not having a conversation with them saying, we're not going to just look at the highest. We're going to look at the highest, the best qualified buyer with the highest offer.
Exactly.
Make sense? Because a buyer may put a high offer just to win, and they may not be a solid buyer, and it might all fall apart on financing. So I want to make sure that I'm looking for a buyer that's putting a chunk down. I'm looking that they're with a lender that is respectable and can get the job done, because not all of them can. So I'm looking for a buyer that is solid, that's why I want to talk to their lender.
Which is really hard to do on a Saturday morning if you make offers due by noon.
Yeah.
You're not doing your due diligence to represent the seller well.
Actually, as a buyer's agent, I think one of the best things you can do in a highly competitive market is say to your lender, would you be willing to call the listing agent and sing the praises of our buyer?
Yeah.
And that can really be the tipping point for some sellers.
Yeah.
And listing agents, because listing agents have a lot of influence on their sellers as far as who are the good actors and who are the bad actors. Make sense? So setting expectations on time and how time is of the essence. We don't have days and days to go over stuff. We need to get things done. Set document expectations. The first time your buyers and sellers see a sale contract should not be at the time of writing an offer or accepting offers. I give them a copy of the contract when we first start working together. And I say, I know this isn't probably the most exciting reading material I could give you, but I don't want the first time for you to see this. And then you see how many pages there are and everything. And you go, oh my God. Overwhelm, right? So I want them to see this. Some will read it, some won't, some will at least glance at it. And I'm talking about the documents we have to have everything in writing. Even if we counter with the other side and we come to agreement until it's in writing and everybody's signed, it is not a done deal. Because sellers can change their mind, another buyer can come in and it doesn't feel good and it really shouldn't happen. But I've seen where a good offer, a seller and a buyer, they're negotiating, another buyer comes in with a higher offer and you might have just talked about, oh yeah, okay, we're good with this price and this, and you've come to agreement and it just hasn't been finalized in paper and signed. And then the seller decides, boom, to go with this other buyer. And as an agent, that's what makes it hard, that we have to tell our clients, when we counter, we're usually doing that verbally or through text or email. We're not sending a counter offer addendum every time we're going back and forth. So when we say this is what we agree upon, we should honor our word. Because for us as agents, it's hard for me to go to that co-op agent and say, so don't always get mad at the co-op agent because sometimes it was the seller who made that decision. So just telling you, set the communication expectations. Be sure to find out how your client prefers to be communicated with. If you're calling them all the time and they don't ever answer phone calls and you're leaving voice messages and they hate voice messages, but you never asked, you need to know how they communicate and you need to tell them the best ways to communicate with you, right? So be very clear on what works best and how they can best get a hold of you. Set parameters. Okay, I'm gonna set contingencies. If you're going to go out of town, you better have somebody watching your business. Even if you think you can do everything yourself remotely, you still need someone, a peer partner, another agent ready to help you and take care of things. It is your job. Nobody wants to hear, oh, I couldn't get that document signed. I was on vacation or I was sick. Yeah, that happens. But when you're self-employed, you have to find somebody to cover for you when you can't do things. It is not an excuse that people are going, you lose your buyer's house, their dream home because you didn't get stuff signed fast enough because you were in the Bahamas and you couldn't get the internet to work. There's no excuse for that. It doesn't mean you can't go on vacation. You have to make sure you've got everything covered. Talking about the market with them so that they understand the market that they're stepping into as a buyer and as a seller. What they hear on the news is usually 30 days behind what's actually happening. Tell them how the technology works. Tell them how .loop works. If they've never done electronic documents, I think most people have, but not all have. You've got to get them comfortable with that. gaining their trust is really important. Reviews, you're going to ask them at the end of this. I'm going to ask you, you're going to get a survey, and I would love for you to fill that out. It's really important. It's always my honor when my clients take the time to fill out those surveys and give me reviews. And that's why if you would be so kind to give me a brief review, I would also like your permission to use this in my advertising and marketing, because we can say we're great all day. It's when other people say we're great that it really impacts others, right? Homework. Here's your homework. If you started your buyers and seller consultation materials, you're to get those finished up by Thursday, or at least make some significant progress. Okay, it's time to go to the business meeting. Remember, go on Zoom. I don't know if that has it fixed so that goes Facebook Live, but you need to go on Zoom. It's a different Zoom than this one. So we're going to scoot down the hall. It's been a pleasure, and you guys have a great rest of your day.